everyone, welcome back to my channel. So Halloween is just a few days away, so I decided to do a spooky book recommendation video. And these recommendations are going to be for those of you who aren't into horror or thriller and can't handle anything too spooky. I feel like this is a good list if you want to kind of dip your toes into spooky books, but nothing in the horror genre. So the first book series I'm going to recommend should come at no surprise, and that is the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. This book series, to me, really screams like the fall and winter seasons. The first three books are more geared for like middle grade, but when you get into like book 4 and higher, the series gets really dark and there's a lot of like spooky and creepy elements to it, especially book 4. I remember reading book 4 when it was released, so I must have been in junior high, and I remember I was reading it late at night, and when we got to the graveyard scene at the end of the book, I just remember having nightmares and I had to sleep with the lights on, and yeah, it was just, I remember it just really freaking me out. But I think this is a great series for all ages. I think anyone can read this series. It's so fantastic. If you haven't read Harry Potter, what are you doing? But it definitely does have some really creepy elements to it, especially in the Chamber of Secrets when they go down into the cave with all the spiders. That's really creepy. So yeah, there's definitely moments in this series that I think is just kind of perfect for this spooky fall season. The next book series I have to recommend is The Unbecoming of Myra Dyer by Michelle Hodkin. This series is so interesting. To me, this is definitely young adult thriller, kind of definitely creepy at times, really just eerie and dark. And what makes it so dark is because we're in the first person point of view. So we're following our main character, Mara, and at the beginning of the story, she goes through some traumatic event where she basically forgets what happened and she just wakes up in the hospital 3 days later not knowing what happened. So her and her family move to Florida, I want to say, to kind of help Mara get over like this traumatic incident. But she ends up going through pretty severe PTSD, and we don't know if Mara is actually crazy or if she's seeing things or what she's seeing is actually real, because it's in first person. So what she's seeing, we're seeing, and we're believing her. And so that's what makes this book so creepy and very suspenseful, and there are just really interesting elements to it. I loved this series so much. I read the first book just straight. I was reading it throughout the night, and I remember having to turn on the lights because I were getting to some really like creepy parts to it. Next, I recommend The Diviners by Libba Bray. I love this book series, and the third book was just released a year ago, so there are so far 3 books in the series. It consists of The Diviners, Lair of Dreams, and the third one is Before the Devil Breaks You. So for the longest time, I didn't want to pick up this series because I thought it was going to be too creepy, too thriller, too horror, but I'm really glad I did. It is young adult, so it's not as intense as, you know, adult horror or anything, and I don't think this falls under the line of horror, but there's definitely creepy, thriller, spooky, eerie atmosphere in this book. It's really good. So this book is set in New York City in the 1920s, and we are following our main character, Evie. And Evie has special powers where if she touches something that belongs to someone, she knows their deepest, darkest secrets, and a whole bunch of brutal murders start happening in New York, and Evie basically tries to figure out the murders. And then we also get a whole bunch of other characters. Evie's not the only main character. Like, as the series progresses, we get to see a lot more of these characters and all their different powers. There are ghosts involved, and there's like supernatural elements, and it's just really creepy and eerie, and at times I really found myself kind of creeped out. So if you want to read something young adult that is kind of maybe borderline horror a little bit, it's not really horror, but something a little more thrilling, In young adult, I highly recommend The Diviners because it does get pretty spooky at times. The next book I have isn't necessarily spooky, but it is pretty dark, and that is Nevernight by Kristoff. This is adult fiction, and in this story we follow our main character, Mia, and Mia is trying to go to a school of assassins so that she can train, become an assassin, and avenge her family's death. So as I said, this book isn't necessarily spooky. It's not necessarily horror, but there are a lot of creepy scenes, and it is really dark. It gets pretty violent at times. There is strong language. That's something to kind of watch out for. There's also kind of graphic love scenes as well, but it is very dark, just the violence and some of the fighting scenes, and there's a lot of blood, but there's also really like cringe-worthy scenes. There's a little bit of torture involved as well. So I think if you're looking for something a little more dark and more adult and mature, but not necessarily horror still, then I definitely recommend Nevernight, because there were definitely some scenes where I kind of had to take a step back and I was like, whoa, that was pretty dark. The next book series I have to recommend is probably like my #1 book recommendation for this video. I probably should have done it as #1, but I didn't. And that is the Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Carrie Maniscalco. I love this series so much. So book 1 is Stalking Jack the Ripper, book 2 is Hunting Prince Dracula, and book 3 was just recently released, and that is Escaping from Houdini. So in this series we are following our main character Audrey Rose, and this is set in the, I believe, 1700s, 1800s, 1800s in England. And at this time, women or girls are basically being trained to be the perfect lady and go to tea parties and sew and crochet and stuff like that. But Audrey Rose does not want to do that. She wants to study forensic science with her uncle, and she basically kind of defies society and sneaks to study forensic medicine. Then all of these gruesome murders start happening, and the murderer signs his like confessions Jack the Ripper. So this is kind of like a loose interpretation of the story Jack the Ripper, and Audrey Rose tries to basically figure out who Jack the Ripper is. And it's just, it is so good. It is so, so good. It's creepy, and there are spooky times, and it's thrilling, and you don't know who the murderer is until the very end. Like, I was shocked, and it's very surprising, and it's just, there's a lot of really interesting elements involved. There's a little bit of supernatural, but not much. Mainly this book series is based on science, which is what I loved about it so much. I enjoyed kind of like that balance between the supernatural and science, and it just explains everything scientifically. So I really liked that. It was really believable. And I don't want to go into too much detail in Hunting Prince Dracula or Escaping from Houdini, but basically kind of like the same concept. Hunting Prince Dracula is my favorite so far of the 3, just because it's set in Romania, and it's just so cool. I loved the characters, but I could just go on and on about this book series, but it is so, so, so good. So if you like kind of like Bones, it's a little similar to that, but it's a little bit darker, I think, a little bit like creepier, especially like the setting. Just, I don't know, it just kind of has like an eerie atmosphere, and it makes this series is like the perfect time to read in October. So my next recommendations are graphic novels. The first one is Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. This is a collection of short stories, and they are definitely spooky and creepy and a little graphic, a little violent, but the pictures and the images are so vibrant and just amazing. I absolutely love this graphic novel. Like, look at some of these pictures. It's just, I really, really enjoy reading this graphic novel around this time of year because it is pretty creepy and spooky for a graphic novel. Next, I have a manga, and that is Vampire Night by Matsuri Hino, and I enjoy this manga. It's kind of the first manga that I've really been following and reading more than just one, and I really enjoy it. It's not overly graphic, it's not overly violent. It is about vampires, and it's kind of like tamed, I would say, but I think it is still kind of falls into the realm of this time of year because we are dealing with vampires, and there are some scenes where there's blood, and I do think there's death involved as well, and it can get a little creepy at times, but it's not like overly creepy. So I really am enjoying it. Basically, the setting of this story is at an academy where there are two types of classes. We have the day class, who are human, and the night class, who are vampires. And our main character, Yuki, she kind of helps transition the day class from the night class, like at sunset and sunrise, so that the vampires and the humans kind of stay separate. And it's really, really interesting. I kind of like the twist that's happening. And what I also like is that I feel like it's not predictable. I'm having trouble kind of figuring out where the story is going, and each volume I'm getting a little bit more surprised. So I'm really, really enjoying it. So if there's like a manga that you kind of want to start and you like vampires and you like kind of supernatural stuff and you want something that's really easy to follow and that's not overly graphic or really difficult, then I recommend Vampire Knight. And the last recommendation I have is a graphic novel series, and that is The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina by, who's it by? By Roberto Aguirre Sacasa. And I just recently started reading this graphic novel just a couple of days ago because of the Netflix show. I love the show. It is based on this comic book, and it's kind of like a loose representation of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. You know, we're following Sabrina Spellman, and she is a witch, and she's in high school, and we have also her aunt, and then Harvey is the main character as well. If you like Riverdale, I absolutely loved it, then I think you're gonna really enjoy this show as well. It's very, very similar. And this show is dark, but as of right now, there hasn't been any graphic language, there isn't any nudity, it's just very violent and bloody. So keep that in mind. It's definitely spooky and creepy, and there's those paranormal, supernatural elements involved. Alright guys, well that is it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Comment down below, let me know some more spooky book recommendations for people like me who are chicken and just basically get scared of everything and can't watch any horror movies or read any horror books. So yeah, I'd love to have some more like young adult spooky thriller recommendations, because I don't think I can venture into horror, even adult thriller just yet. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!